Hey, wide awake family. If you see this, it's your sign to smash that like button. Yes, you listening right now. That way YouTube shows you more amazing stories like this one. We love you all. Now enjoy the stories.
I swear from the second I sat down across from him, something already felt off, but not in a loud, scary way. More like the quiet weirdness that you can't put your finger on yet. He looked normal enough. Clean haircut, simple clothes, nothing screaming psycho. He wasn't awkward either. He greeted me with this soft smile like he'd been excited to meet me all week. He pulled out my chair, asked if I found the place okay, all that basic stuff. But the weird thing started instantly. His phone wouldn't stop lighting up. Not buzzing loudly or ringing, just that soft flash every time a new text popped up. He glanced at it, smiled in this tiny suspicious way, then locked the screen. Then 2 seconds later, another flash. Then another. Then another. I tried to ignore it, but it kept happening so often that even the waitress gave him a weird look. We ordered drinks and the convo started off normal. I asked what he did for work. Instead of answering, he showed me a thumbs up emoji on his phone. Not typed. Not sent to me. Just showed me the screen like that explained everything. Like we were in some secret club where thumbs up meant I work in IT or something. I laughed awkwardly because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Every question I asked got an emoji. I asked if he lived nearby. He showed me a house emoji. I asked what his hobbies were. He showed me a weightlifting emoji. I asked if he had siblings. He showed me 2 smiley faces. I asked what he studied. He showed me a book emoji. I asked why he wasn't talking. He showed me a zipped mouth emoji. He didn't speak. Not even once. He just smiled politely like this was normal. And the texts kept coming. Ping. Flash. Ping. Flash. Ping. Flash. His phone screen was lighting up so often that it felt like a strobe light at a club. I noticed he never ignored the messages. Every time the screen lit up, his eyes darted down automatically like muscle memory. He'd unlocked the phone so fast his fingers blurred. But he didn't reply with words. All he did was flick through loads of conversation threads filled entirely with emojis. Hundreds of them. Emoji after emoji after emoji. Chains of symbols that didn't make sense to me. Random combinations like a key, then a fire symbol, then a clock, then a car. Sometimes he sent 3 identical emojis to 3 different conversations at the same time. Sometimes he switched chats in under a second like he was trained to. Something in me started tightening. Not panic, but a deep, uneasy feeling like I was sitting across from someone living in a different world entirely. I asked if everything was okay. He smiled again, locked his phone, and put it face down on the table. And then it buzzed again. Twice. Then again. This time he didn't even try to hide it. He flicked his eyes at the notifications and smirked like the messages were inside jokes, but his hands were shaking slightly. Not scared shaking. Adrenaline shaking. The waitress came to bring our drinks, and even she stared at him because the phone wouldn't stop lighting up. She asked if we needed anything else, and he finally opened his mouth for the first time since I sat down. He said one word. Just one. He said done. Not in the way someone says they're done talking, but in the way someone says they finished a task, completed something. The waitress nodded awkwardly and walked away. I asked him what he meant by done. He didn't answer. He lifted his phone again, showed me a tiny hourglass emoji, then placed it gently back on the table. My chest tightened so hard I nearly choked. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of whatever world he was connected to through that phone. And then everything happened fast. So fast I didn't even have time to process the first part before the second part crashed into it. I heard heavy footsteps behind me. Fast ones. Purposeful. I turned my head slightly and saw 3 officers walking straight toward our table, not power walking, not approaching cautiously. They were locking onto him like he was a target. My heart slammed into my ribs. He didn't react. He didn't even turn around. One officer called his name firmly, not shouting, but speaking in that tone that makes everyone nearby freeze. He lowered his phone slowly, placed both hands flat on the table, and looked up with the same small smile he'd used on me. The calmness on his face didn't match anything happening around us. 2 officers grabbed his arms. Another officer grabbed his phone mid-vibration. It didn't stop buzzing. Not even with them holding it. Texts kept appearing so rapidly it looked like a glitch. Chains of emojis kept popping up, flooding the screen faster than anyone could read them. One officer muttered that the phone needed to be shut off immediately. The officer next to me told me I wasn't in trouble, but needed to move back quickly. I stepped away from the table with my hands shaking so badly I could barely breathe. Customers around us whispered and stared as the officers pulled him up and turned him around to cuff him. That's when I heard it. One officer said they'd finally caught the ringleader. The other said they'd been tracking him for weeks. Texting-based scams. Code systems built entirely out of emojis. Instructions disguised as harmless symbols. Payments, locations, drops, pickups, all communicated using combinations only members knew. Hundreds of people involved. Dozens of victims. Thousands of messages sent every hour. He wasn't nervous on the date. He wasn't awkward or shy. He was multitasking a crime network under the table. His phone buzzed again, so loud the officer holding it swore under his breath and shoved it into a signal-blocking pouch. As they escorted him out, he looked at me once. Not angry. Not ashamed. Not scared. He smiled. Like the date was still going well. Like nothing about this was strange to him. Like leaving mid-drink in handcuffs was just another emoji in his dictionary. I walked home shaking, replaying every little moment of him showing me symbols instead of words, now realizing they weren't cute or quirky or socially awkward. He wasn't avoiding conversation. He was working. And I was sitting across from him thinking he was just a weird texter. I knew something was off the second she said we had to walk her dog first. Not because walking a dog is weird, but because she said it like it was urgent, like the date couldn't start until the dog got its walk. She messaged me earlier that day, all friendly and excited, saying she found the cutest dog ever and needed someone to help her walk it because she hurt her leg a bit. I didn't question it. She sent a picture of the dog, a small brown thing with big eyes and a collar that looked too loose. It looked harmless, and she seemed harmless, so I agreed. When I got to the little park she told me to meet her at, she was already there, holding the dog by the collar because the leash was apparently lost somewhere. She smiled all bright and casual, but she kept glancing around like she wasn't fully focused on me. She handed me the dog instantly like she'd been waiting for me to take it. The dog wasn't calm. It was pulling at the collar, breathing hard, looking around like it was trying to find something. She kept saying it had a lot of energy, but the dog wasn't energetic. It was panicked, like it was trying to drag me somewhere specific. I tried to ask what kind of dog it was, or where she got it, or how long she'd had it, and she kept giving short answers that didn't match up. She said she found it yesterday, then said it escaped from a friend, then she said she adopted it last week. She wouldn't look me in the eyes for more than a second. She kept checking her phone, refreshing again, texting someone quickly, then locking the screen. She told me to follow the dog wherever it pulled. I laughed at first because I thought she was joking, but she said it again, dead serious this time. She said the dog always knows where it wants to go, and we should just let it guide us. She tried to make it sound cute, but her voice had this shaky edge to it, like she was scared I'd say no. The dog yanked the collar so suddenly it nearly pulled me forward. It started dragging me down a path, then out of the park, then toward a row of shops that were all closing for the night. She followed behind us, limping slightly but not enough to match her hurt leg story. She kept rushing me, telling me not to hold the dog back. I didn't know why I kept going. Maybe because the dog seemed desperate. Maybe because she looked stressed. Maybe because I didn't want to be rude on a first date. We left the busy street and turned into a small side road with dim lights. The dog pulled harder. Then it turned into a narrow alley behind the shops. The girl stopped at the corner and told me to keep going, that she'd wait there because her leg hurt. Her voice cracked when she said it. She kept peeking into the alley like she was checking if something was happening yet. My heart started beating faster. The alley was basically empty, just bins and shadows, and that weird humming noise from the back of the shops. The dog kept tugging me forward, whining now, and I followed because something in me felt like turning back would be worse than going forward. When the dog stopped, it wasn't random. Two people were crouched behind the back door of a shop, trying to force it open. One had a crowbar wedged under the door frame. The other was picking at the lock with something metal. They both jumped when they heard the dog bark and stared at me like I wasn't real. I froze so hard I couldn't even breathe. The girl at the end of the alley yelled something, not at me, but at them, something sharp and angry. They both turned toward her. She had her phone out, recording them, shaking so bad the camera light was trembling. Instead of running, she held the phone higher. One of the men cursed and stepped toward her. The dog barked again louder. And then the entire street blew up with noise. Police. Not walking. Sprinting. From both ends of the alley. Torches flashing. Radios squealing. Boots hitting concrete like thunder. The men tried to run, but officers grabbed them instantly. One officer slammed the crowbar out of the guy's hand. Another tackled the second guy into a bin. The alley echoed with metal, shouting, and the dog barking nonstop. I stood there gripping the collar, completely stunned. An officer ran to me, telling me to back up and hold the dog tight. I couldn't even talk. The girl walked toward us slowly, her hands shaking like she'd been holding in fear for hours. Then the truth came out. The dog wasn't hers. It wasn't anyone's. It belonged to the two criminals. They had it with them earlier in the day, but it slipped out of its collar when they were scouting the alley and ran off. The girl saw the dog wandering the streets scared and dirty and followed it. She saw it stop by the alley repeatedly, like it wanted to go back but was too scared. She followed the direction it kept pulling toward and realized something bad was happening. She tried reporting the men but didn't have exact proof of what they were doing. So she made a plan. She used dating apps to find someone who could walk the dog without the men recognizing her. She needed a stranger to act natural. Needed the dog to feel safe enough to go back to where it had escaped from. Needed the police to be nearby when it happened. She wasn't using me for anything dangerous. I mean, it could turn dangerous, but she wasn't tricking me for fun or content or anything messed up like that. She needed someone the men wouldn't recognize. Someone random. Someone they wouldn't chase if things went wrong. She needed help, and she didn't know how to explain any of this without sounding insane. She looked at me with this exhausted, almost broken look while police arrested the two men and bagged their tools. The officer next to her said she'd done the right thing but should have never involved someone else like this. She apologized over and over. The dog sat next to me the whole time, shaking but calm enough that I kept a hand on its back. When the officers finished cuffing the men, one of them said the dog would be taken to a shelter because it clearly wasn't treated well. I walked out of that alley in complete silence, the girl walking a few steps behind me, both of us processing the fact that the date wasn't a date at all. The dog wasn't hers. The plan wasn't safe. And I wasn't supposed to be anything more than a stranger walking a scared animal back to the scene of a crime. I still don't understand how a date that started so normal turned into one of the most disturbing things I've ever been dragged into. It wasn't even supposed to be a big deal. Just a drink at a rooftop bar with a girl who seemed calm and kind of mysterious in her messages. She wasn't loud or overly flirty. She typed in short sentences, always polite, always asking how my day was. She suggested the rooftop bar because she liked the view at night. I didn't think anything of it. Loads of people pick spots like that. The place was nicer than I expected. Warm lights hanging across the railings, soft music playing from speakers. The whole city stretched out under us like a giant glowing map. You could feel a bit of wind, but not the freezing type, just enough to make the lights wobble slightly. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a small round table close to the edge. She waved and smiled, but the smile didn't fully reach her eyes. I sat down and she asked how my day was, but she kept glancing over my shoulder before I could even finish speaking. It wasn't a casual glance either. It was sharp, focused, like she was checking something behind me every few seconds. I tried not to make it obvious, but after the fourth time she did it, I started getting this weird tight feeling in my chest. I asked if she was cold or uncomfortable, and she said no way too quickly. She tried to keep the convo going, but her eyes kept drifting past me like magnets. She laughed at something I said, but even while laughing she glanced over my shoulder. It wasn't normal. Nobody multitasks fear like that. I turned around casually, just pretending to stretch, and that's when I saw him. A man sitting alone at another table. But he wasn't drinking anything. He wasn't eating anything. He was wearing a mask. Not a medical one or a ski mask or anything obvious. It was one of those plain black half masks that covered the top of the face, the type you'd wear at some weird costume event. It looked totally out of place in a bar. The rest of him was normal, hoodie, jeans, trainers, but the mask made every part of him look wrong, like he shouldn't be there. And in his hand, under the table, he was holding a phone pointed at us. Just slightly angled, not fully lifted, like he was filming secretly. We made eye contact, or at least I think we did. It's hard to tell when you can only see the bottom half of someone's face. His jaw didn't move. His breathing didn't change. He just stared. I turned back to her and she immediately whispered that I shouldn't react. She said everything was fine. Her voice cracked on the last word. Her hands were under the table, shaking so slightly that she thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. She looked like someone who'd been awake for too long, like she was barely holding herself together. I asked her quietly what was going on. She didn't answer. Her eyes flicked behind me again. I didn't want to turn around this time, but my brain forced it. The masked man had leaned forward slightly. Phone still raised, still filming. He wasn't pretending. He wasn't hiding it. He was completely still, a statue. And then I noticed something even worse. Two more men were sitting farther back, not masked, but watching us. One pretending to scroll his phone, the other pretending to drink. Both kept glancing at the masked guy like they were waiting for a signal. I whispered her name again. She swallowed hard and whispered that she didn't know them personally. That's all she said at first. Just that. Then she added something that made my stomach drop into my feet. She said she didn't think they'd actually show up. I didn't understand. I didn't know what she meant. She was staring at her drink like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. I asked her what she was talking about, and she said something about people online, about some trend she thought was fake, about a dare someone messaged her months ago. She kept speaking in fragments like she was scared finishing the sentence would make something worse happen. She said she thought the whole hostage date thing was just some dumb online rumor. She thought nobody actually did it. She thought it was just trolling. I didn't know what hostage date meant until she whispered that people online were pretending to be taken on dates while someone filmed them from far away to make fake scary videos. She thought the messages she got about it were jokes. She blocked the guy who suggested it. She ignored the accounts that told her she'd be perfect for the role. She thought it was all just trolls messing around. She didn't realize those accounts belonged to actual people. People who were watching her. She said she wasn't involved. She said she didn't want any part of it. She said she didn't know they were real. She said she didn't think meeting someone innocent like me would attract them. I didn't get the chance to ask anything else because everything happened at once. The rooftop door burst open so hard the music cut out for a moment. Police sprinted out at full speed. Not walking, sprinting. Customers stood up instantly. Drinks spilled. People backed away. The masked man tried to stand, but officers were on him before he could even move the chair. They grabbed his phone, pulled off the mask, shoved him to the floor. The two men farther back tried to run, but officers pinned them against the railing before they could make it halfway. One officer shouted that the gang had been tracked for weeks. Another shouted that they'd been posting staged hostage videos on underground sites. Another shouted that they finally caught them mid-recording. My date covered her face with her hands and started crying. One officer rushed to her, asking if she was forced to meet me, asking if she knew the men, asking if she'd been threatened. She said no over and over. She kept saying she thought it was fake. She kept saying she thought it wasn't real. She kept apologizing to me without even looking up. The officer explained to me quietly that the masked man had been filming us as part of a video they were planning to upload, claiming she was being held by someone and the gang was monitoring her. The boyfriend was supposed to look unaware. The footage was supposed to look tense. The gang made loads of fake videos like that to freak people out online. They weren't planning to hurt me. They just wanted the scene. They picked me because I looked normal and clueless. The whole date was bait. I wasn't a person to them. I was a prop. They cuffed the men and walked them out while everyone watched from their tables. The masked man kept staring at me as they dragged him away, no emotion on his face at all. I left the rooftop with the officer escorting me out, my date crying into her hands, the wind colder now even though it hadn't changed. The worst part wasn't the masked guy. It was knowing they wanted her for months. And I was just the background character they needed for the perfect shot.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I don't think anything will ever top how confused I felt the moment I stepped through his door. Like my brain knew something was off before I even fully understood what I was looking at. The whole date started so normal that I still can't connect the first 10 minutes with everything that happened after. He seemed like one of those quiet guys who works in tech, listens more than he talks, and types in those short messages where everything ends with a full stop. He wasn't flirty, he wasn't pushy, he wasn't weird. He just asked if I wanted to come over and watch something at his place because he wasn't feeling like going out. I'd done home dates before, so I didn't think much of it. He told me he lived in a small flat in an old building near the station. When I got there, everything looked normal. Boring, even. The hallway smelled like laundry detergent and cigarette smoke mixed together. Someone upstairs was blasting music just quiet enough that you couldn't recognize the song. He opened the door before I knocked. He smiled in this quiet way like he didn't really know how to smile properly. He stepped aside, told me to come in, and I walked into the living room expecting maybe a messy sofa or some random gaming setup. I didn't expect what I saw. The second the door closed behind me, my stomach dropped. Every wall, every single wall, had printed papers taped to them. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Some were crooked, some were perfectly lined. Some were black and white, some in color. I thought it was some art project or something until I stepped closer trying to make sense of it. They were my pictures. All my posts, all my stories, all my old selfies, my holiday photos, screenshots of my TikToks, pictures I forgot I even posted, even ones buried deep on my profile that I hadn't looked at in years, all printed and taped like wallpaper. My captions were still attached on some of them. On others, he cropped them. Some were zoomed in too close, like he wanted to see details in what he looks at. I froze completely. He just stood there behind me, watching my reaction, not saying anything, not explaining anything, not even acting embarrassed. He looked kind of proud, like he'd been waiting for me to see it, like this was some big surprise he planned. I stepped back slowly because my head was spinning. I tried to smile like it wasn't insane, like it wasn't the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen. I told myself maybe he was just socially weird and this was some kind of joke or misunderstanding. Maybe he printed them for a project. Maybe he wanted to talk about social media or something. But then I walked deeper into the flat. It wasn't just the living room. The kitchen walls were covered too. Every cupboard door had one of my pictures taped to it. The fridge, the oven door, the microwave. Even the drawers. I saw myself laughing with friends, myself holding coffee, myself in a mirror selfie from last winter. Some were printed so low quality they looked distorted, stretched, pixelated. He followed me silently, still not saying anything, still smiling this tight, weird smile that didn't match the situation at all. He wasn't breathing heavily or sweating or acting unhinged. He was too calm, too still. I told him I needed the toilet just to give myself a second to think, but he said the bathroom was a bit messy. He stood in the doorway like he didn't want me wandering anywhere else. My hands were shaking at this point. I tried to reach for my phone, but he suddenly shifted his body just slightly, like he noticed, like he was watching every move I made. I told him I left something outside in my bag, and I wanted to go grab it quickly. That's when his face changed. Just for a moment. Not angry, not sad, more like disappointed, like I was ruining his plan. He stepped closer. Just one step, enough to block my path to the door. The hallway behind him was narrow, and the walls were plastered with even more pictures of me, ones I didn't even remember taking. I could see a whole strip of them leading to his bedroom. I realized that I couldn't outrun him in that space. I couldn't push past him without him grabbing me. I felt the coldest wave of panic hit me. I tried to keep my voice steady and asked if we could go for a walk instead before picking a movie. He opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. And then the entire flat exploded with noise. The door behind him didn't open normally. It blew open. Police burst inside so fast I didn't even register the footsteps at first. The door slammed into the wall. Officers rushed in shouting orders. He spun around with this tiny shocked sound like he'd been caught doing something he didn't think anyone knew about. They grabbed him instantly. Pressed him against the wall covered in my pictures. Pulled his hands behind his back. He didn't fight. He didn't shout. He just kept saying he didn't do anything wrong. that he wasn't hurting anyone. His voice cracked weirdly like he genuinely believed it. I stumbled back against a sofa while one officer rushed to me, asking if I was okay, if he touched me, if I lived there, if I was alone with him. I kept saying I didn't understand what was happening. My voice sounded far away even to me. I felt dizzy looking at the walls, seeing my own face staring back from every direction. The officer explained everything fast while another officer searched the flat. Neighbors had reported screams coming from that same flat earlier in the evening. Not soft ones, not confused ones, real screams. Someone begging, someone crying, someone trying to escape. The officers were already on the way when someone else called saying a woman had run out of the building before, barefoot and shaking, claiming the man was watching her online accounts. But she left before anyone could get details. They thought I might be the next one. When they saw through the window that he wasn't letting me leave, they forced the door open. Another officer came out of the hallway holding a stack of printed photos of other women. Not just me. Dozens, maybe more. Girls from online, girls from dating apps, girls who probably thought he was harmless. I felt sick. Properly sick. They asked if I wanted an ambulance, and I shook my head even though my legs were numb. They guided me out of the flat while he kept shouting that he just liked pictures, that he wasn't dangerous, that he didn't hurt me. But the walls inside told a completely different story. He didn't invite me there for a date. He invited me to add me to the collection. He invited me for the walls. I still don't know how I didn't catch the weird vibe from the start. Maybe because he seemed so normal on the app that nothing about him felt like a warning. He had pictures of him in a chef jacket, standing next to plates of food, smiling like he was proud of his work. He talked about food the way some people talk about their pets, super soft, super excited, super detailed. He wasn't cringe or full of himself either. He said he was trying to open his own restaurant one day and wanted someone who enjoyed good food. So when he suggested meeting at his workplace after hours because it was quieter, I actually thought it sounded kinda interesting. He said he wanted to show me where he cooked, said he had keys since he sometimes prepped ingredients in the evening. It didn't sound sketchy at first. Chefs do weird hours all the time. I didn't think he was lying. The taxi dropped me off on a long street full of restaurants, but his one stood out instantly, and not in a good way. The windows were dusty. The sign outside was half peeled off. The chairs inside were stacked, not like they were closing for the night, but like they'd been stacked for months. The menu board was sun-faded. The doorway had a thick chain hanging off to the side like someone cut it. The whole place looked dead. Fully dead. I checked the address again because I thought maybe I got the wrong place, but it matched perfectly. I messaged him asking if I was at the right spot, and he replied super fast saying he was inside and to come through the side door. My stomach turned slightly at the word side door, but I walked around anyway. The alley was quiet. Too quiet. I found the door he meant half open, a dim light inside flickering like it was struggling to stay on. I knocked once, but nobody answered. Then I heard footsteps inside, fast ones. Then the door pulled open and he appeared. He looked exactly like his pictures. Chef jacket, apron hanging loose, hair tied back. He smiled really wide when he saw me, almost too wide. He kept saying sorry for the mess, sorry for the dust, sorry the place wasn't running properly right now. He said something about management issues and customers complaining, but he laughed it off like none of it mattered. He told me to come inside anyway because he wanted to show me what he was working on. I stepped in, and everything in my body stiffened. The restaurant was worse inside, way worse. Tables shoved to the side, broken plates under one of the counters, a fridge door hanging open with no food inside. The floor was sticky in places and dusty in others like nobody cleaned anything in ages. The kitchen lights were dim and flickering, and the air smelled like metal and something sour. There was no way he worked here. This wasn't a business. This was a graveyard of a restaurant. He kept talking though, acting completely normal, walking ahead of me, and showing me the counters like he was giving a tour. He pointed at a shelf and said he used to keep spices there. He tapped a broken oven and said he once burned a steak in it and nearly cried. He spoke like this place meant everything to him, but none of it made sense. The appliances weren't just old. They were dead, unplugged, dusty, untouched. Like nobody had cooked in that kitchen in ages. I tried to ask him when the restaurant closed down, and he dodged the question so smoothly it almost scared me more. He said something about renovations. Then he said something about legal stuff. Then he laughed and said he'd explain later. Then he said something that made my stomach drop for real. He said I needed to act natural if anyone asked. I froze slightly and asked what he meant, and he waved it off like it was nothing. He said some people might stop by, and he wanted me to just say you help out sometimes. He said it in this super casual voice, but his eyes didn't match his tone. They were too focused, too intense, too sharp for someone talking about something harmless. I told him I didn't understand. He told me not to worry. I definitely worried. Before I could even reply, before I could decide whether to fake needing the toilet or pretend I forgot something outside, before I could plan anything, the front door exploded open. Properly exploded. Boot steps, shouting, heavy bodies rushing inside, flashlights slicing across the broken dining room, officers yelling orders, one shouting that the place was under inspection, another shouting about illegal activity, another shouting that nobody move. I didn't have time to react before an officer grabbed my arm gently but firmly and pulled me toward the wall. More officers surrounded the guy. He froze completely. No smile now, no fake chef charm. One officer ripped a stack of documents out of his hands. Another officer yelled that he'd been warned before. Another shouted that the building was condemned and nobody was supposed to enter. Condemned. Not under renovation. Not temporarily closed. Fully shut down by authorities. I felt sick. Properly sick. The officer next to me asked if I knew him, if I was related, if I worked with him. I said no to everything. My voice kept shaking. He told me to stay still. The chef guy kept trying to explain himself, but every sentence made everything worse. He said he brought me here to prove he wasn't running it alone. He said business inspectors kept accusing him of illegal things. He said he just needed someone to say they were his partner. He said he didn't mean to lie. He said he didn't mean to trick me. He said he needed proof he wasn't operating alone. My head was spinning. He didn't want a date. He wanted an alibi. He wanted me to stand next to him when the police came. He wanted me to act like I knew him, like I worked with him, like I was part of the business so he wouldn't get in trouble alone. He usually had to find someone gullible enough to show up. But the worst part, the officers weren't there because of him. They were there because neighbors had reported activity in a building that was supposed to be empty. Someone saw shadows through the windows. Someone saw movement inside. Someone heard noises earlier. The police were already planning a raid. He didn't know what time they'd arrive. He just needed someone next to him when they walked in. Someone to blame. Someone to claim was involved. Someone to take heat off him. Me. The officer guiding me out kept saying I was lucky. He said if they arrived 10 minutes later, I might have been standing next to the guy when he started lying. He said he could drag me into something serious before I even understood what was going on. The chef guy kept yelling as they walked him out in cuffs that he just needed help, that I ruined it, that he wasn't finished explaining his story. I didn't look at him. The only thing I could think about was how easily he picked me. How easily I walked in. How easily I could have been named as his partner in a business that didn't even exist anymore. I swear the whole reason I even went on that date was because she seemed calm. Not too chatty, not too dry, just normal. Her profile had these random pictures of her drinking iced coffee, sitting on a bench somewhere. Nothing flashy. She messaged like someone who didn't want drama. She said she liked outdoor dates because they made her feel relaxed, and honestly, that sounded good to me. The weather wasn't bad that day either, so I said, sure, we can sit outside somewhere. She picked this small cafe on a wide street with loads of tables out front. It wasn't busy, and the air smelled like coffee and warm bread. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at one of the outside tables even though the inside was basically empty. She waved at me like she'd been waiting ages but pretending she hadn't. She smiled, but there was something stiff about it, like it took effort. She had her phone in her hand when I walked over. Not unusual. What was weird was how she didn't put it down. Not once. Not even for a second. She kept tapping the screen in this frantic rhythm, switching between apps so fast I couldn't even see what she was doing. I thought maybe she was nervous or had social anxiety or was waiting for something important. She barely looked at me at first. She kept glancing over my shoulder, then at the street behind me, then back at her phone like she was trying to line something up. I sat down and tried to start a normal convo, but her eyes wouldn't stay still. They jumped around like she was tracking someone I couldn't see. Every time a stranger walked past, she'd tense up slightly. Her grip on her phone tightened every few seconds. She skimmed through notifications like she was waiting for a specific message. She even angled her chair so she could see both directions of the street without turning too much. The whole vibe felt off, but I kept brushing it away. Some people are just jumpy. Some people hate going inside crowded places. Some people overthink everything. I wasn't going to judge. I just kept talking and letting her ease into the date. When the drinks came, she barely touched hers. She kept holding her phone under the table, sliding her thumb across it repeatedly. Every minute or so, she lifted just slightly, like she wanted to record something but wasn't sure if she should. I thought she was texting her friend for help or something because the date was awkward. I kind of laughed to myself thinking maybe she was planning her exit. But then I noticed something strange. Every time I leaned forward or said something funny, she'd glance around quicker than before, not at me, at the street, at the people walking, at random cars, like she was checking to see if anyone was reacting to us, almost like she was expecting someone specific to show up. I asked if she was okay, and she said, yeah, too quickly, like the word jumped out before her brain could filter it. She kept biting the inside of her cheek and checking her phone. The tapping got faster. Her leg bounced underneath the table like she was burning energy just sitting still. Then she whispered something under her breath. I couldn't read it, but it sounded like she said finally. I didn't get a chance to ask what she meant because everything exploded in seconds. I heard yelling from across the street, this chaotic burst of voices, footsteps pounding. 2 officers sprinted across the road full speed, dodging cars and shouting commands. People at nearby tables stood up. Chairs scraped. The workers inside the cafe froze. The officers were running straight at us. Straight at her. She saw them before I did. Her face went completely blank. Not shocked. Not scared. Blank, like a computer shutting off. She clutched her phone tighter and tried to stand up, but they reached her faster than she could get out of the chair. They grabbed her arms, pushed her against the wall next to the cafe door, and snatched the phone right out of her hand. She started yelling that she didn't do anything, that she was just on a date. She kept pointing at me like I was proof she wasn't lying. I just stood there with my hands halfway up, confused, embarrassed, terrified, and completely lost. One of the officers turned to me and told me to stay put. He wasn't rude, but he was firm enough that my body listened automatically. He asked how long I'd been with her. I said barely 20 minutes. He asked if I knew anything about her ex. I said no. He asked if I knew why she wanted to sit outside. I shook my head. My mouth felt too dry to talk. They sat her down on one of the chairs and started questioning her right there. She wasn't crying. She wasn't acting innocent. She wasn't shouting anymore. She just kept saying the same thing over and over, that nobody believed her, that she needed proof that she wasn't imagining things. I overheard the officers talking to each other, and the pieces snapped into place so quickly they almost made me dizzy. She'd been using dating apps to lure random men to public spots. Not for dates. Not for meeting people. But to make it look like she was constantly being approached and watched by different men so she could send the footage to her ex and claim he was stalking her. She used shots of guys sitting with her, guys walking behind her, guys looking confused. She'd crop it, edit it, twist it. She'd spam her ex with fake videos and screenshots saying, look, he's here again. He won't leave me alone. Why won't anyone listen? The officers said her ex had already filed multiple reports against her for false claims. They told her to stop. They warned her. She didn't. Instead, she started manipulating new people every week to build more fake proof. Me included. They caught her this time because her ex had already blocked her, and she emailed the edited video to the police instead. She sent them footage from earlier dates, claiming her ex was following her in them. But the timestamps didn't match. The outfits didn't match. The backgrounds didn't match. And one of the guys from an older video had contacted police himself saying she'd taken pictures of him without permission. That triggered a proper investigation. They tracked her location through the app she was using, saw she was meeting someone new again, me, and sprinted over before she could stage anything else. The officer finally turned to me and said I wasn't in trouble. I wasn't a suspect. I was one of dozens she had used. I couldn't even look at her when they put her in the car. She stared at me through the window with this weird mix of anger and desperation, like I'd ruined her plan by just sitting there confused instead of acting how she needed me to. I walked home with my head spinning, thinking about how her hands were shaking the whole time, not because she liked me, not because she was nervous, but because she was waiting for her ex to react to a video she hadn't even staged yet. I swear this date started off so normal that my brain wasn't even switched on enough to sense anything weird. The only slightly unusual part was that we met on this gym-themed dating app that people use when they don't want a match with someone who's never stepped on a treadmill in their life. His profile wasn't even that flashy. He had 2 mirror selfies, a picture of him outside some gym I didn't recognize, and one smiley photo that actually looked kinda sweet. He typed like someone friendly but quiet, nothing crazy. He said he wanted to meet for a quick protein shake at his little smoothie place near a massive car park behind the shopping center. The place was always busy, and I'd been there before, so I didn't think anything of it. It felt safer than meeting someone inside a park or in some random quiet corner of the city. I figured it was gonna be one of those simple, forgettable dates where you drink something overpriced and then go home wondering why you even left the house. He was already standing outside when I arrived, leaning against a railing like he'd been waiting a while but was pretending he wasn't. He waved, smiled, and instantly seemed super polite. He asked if I found the place okay, held the door for me, did all that proper gentle stuff that makes you think someone's raised well. His voice was soft too, like he didn't want anyone overhearing. Nothing about him screamed danger. We ordered shakes and sat near the window. The place smelled like bananas, whey powder, and those sweets they put near the till to trick you into buying something extra. The lighting was bright, almost too bright, and everyone inside looked half tired and half hyper from pre-workout. That's when I noticed it. He kept touching his ear. Not scratching it or adjusting it, touching it in a specific way. Quick taps with his fingertip. Short presses. Sometimes he slid his thumb behind his ear like he was adjusting something tiny. At first, I didn't think anything of it because people fidget all the time. Maybe he had an itch or an allergy or something. But the pattern was weird. He'd ask me something, wait for my answer, smile, then tap his ear again. If someone walked past the window, he tapped it. If the blender turned on loudly behind the counter, he tapped it again. Every time he scanned the room, he tapped it. The taps became so frequent that I couldn't ignore them anymore. I kept glancing at his hand every time it moved. Then I realized something else. He never fully looked at me. He kept shifting his eyes to the left, toward the car park outside. He pretended to look casual, like he was just distracted, but his gaze always locked on the same spot through the window. Whenever he thought I wasn't looking, he tilted his head slightly like he was listening to something. I tried to keep the convo normal, but my stomach started tightening because his whole vibe changed the moment he sat down. He wasn't really shy. He wasn't really calm. He was hyper-aware, hyper-focused. Like he had 2 different conversations happening at once, one with me and one through his ear. It clicked in my head out of nowhere. Earpiece. He was talking to someone. Not literally talking out loud, but signaling, responding, checking in, giving info, and every time he angled his head, his eyes flicked toward the rows of cars outside. He wasn't distracted. He was watching. I leaned back a bit and pretended to tie my hair just so I could look out the window properly, and that's when my skin went cold. 3 random men were circling the car park, not close together, but close enough to be watching the same area. They weren't dressed in any suspicious way. They looked like regular people, but they kept glancing toward the smoothie shop entrance, and every time they did, the guy across from me tapped his ear. I didn't understand what was going on yet, but I knew it wasn't anything good. He asked me suddenly if I could take a selfie with him. Not a cute one, not a funny one, just a simple picture. He angled himself so the window and the car park would be behind me. He held the phone weirdly too, like he wanted the background more than my face. I felt this horrible slow panic rising in my chest. I asked why he wanted the picture, and he just laughed this awkward little laugh like he didn't expect me to question it. He mumbled something about memories and tapped his ear again. I think that was the moment I realized I wasn't supposed to be on a date. I was being used for something. I didn't even have time to get up because the entire shop suddenly blew open with noise. The door slammed so hard the windows shook. 2 officers rushed inside, yelling for everyone to stay back. Someone outside shouted for backup. The staff ducked behind the counter. Customers dropped whatever they were holding. The guy across from me jumped so hard his shake tipped over. The officers grabbed him instantly. They pinned his arms behind his back, pushed him against the table, and ripped something from behind his ear. A tiny device. Something that looked like a skin-colored wireless camera or a mic. He started shouting that it wasn't his fault, that he wasn't the main one, that he was just helping. The officers weren't listening. Another officer rushed into the car park and tackled one of the men wandering around. 2 more officers grabbed the other 2 by the parked cars. One of them tried to run, but he barely made it 10 meters before someone slammed him onto the ground. The smoothie shop was silent except for his panicked breathing and the police radio spitting out fast instructions. One of the officers turned to me and asked if I knew what was going on. I shook my head because I honestly didn't. He told me to sit down and stay still for a moment because they needed to confirm I wasn't involved. They explained it fast. The guy I matched with wasn't on a date with me. He was wearing a tiny covered camera that streamed everything he saw directly to the 3 men in the car park. They were waiting for signals, waiting for info about which cars had valuables inside, waiting for his taps, waiting for directions. He wasn't distracted. He was guiding them. He used the gym-themed app because he wanted someone who wouldn't question the backpack he carried with the tight clothes that hid the camera gear. The entire date was a cover. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't shy. He was doing his part in a robbery team. And I was literally the distraction. They took him away while he kept shouting that he didn't do anything violent, like that made it better. The officers pulled the tiny camera device off the table and placed it into a bag while the staff stared like they just watched something out of a crime show. I stood up after a few minutes, still shaking. One officer walked me outside and told me I'd been lucky. He said if the team hadn't monitored that exact car park that day, the thieves would hit multiple cars before anyone even realized. The worst part was that the guy never looked embarrassed. He wasn't scared either. He looked annoyed. Annoyed the date ended before he got the footage he wanted. I don't know why I even agreed to that date. Meeting someone at a lake sounded like a cute idea at first, but the more I walked toward it, the more I started thinking about every weird news story I'd ever heard. She seemed normal on the app, though. She messaged a lot, sent voice notes, talked about wanting some fresh air and a simple walk so she could clear her head. She didn't sound scary or suspicious. She sounded like someone who was bored and wanted company. The lake wasn't far from my area. It was one of those places people go for runs, fishing, quiet walks, stuff like that. You could hear birds, water moving, the soft crunch of stones under your shoes. It looked peaceful, but somehow too peaceful. Like the whole place was holding its breath. I kept checking the messages she sent, making sure I was walking the right direction. She told me to meet her by the far side, the part that's a bit deeper and quieter. I thought she just wanted privacy. I didn't think much of it. I walked down the little slope and saw the water glimmering under the clouds, barely moving. Then I saw her. I recognized her from her pictures instantly. Same hair, same jacket, same bright-looking face. She was standing near the water, but not in a relaxed way. She had her phone out and was filming something. Properly filming. Both hands up, phone pointed forward like she was recording a documentary. She kept stepping sideways, leaning, squinting, trying to get the angle right. I followed her line of sight. That's when everything in my body froze. 2 men were standing near the water's edge on the other side of her. Big, heavy-looking guys. One was wearing a hoodie with the hood up. The other had a cap pulled low. They weren't fishing or skipping stones or doing anything that made sense. They were lifting boxes. Proper boxes. Taped up. Some looked heavy. Some looked stained like they'd been dragged or dropped somewhere. And they were dumping them into the lake. Not gently. Not quietly. They were pushing each one into the water and letting it sink. The boxes made these thick splashes, then disappeared under the surface. My stomach tightened instantly. I didn't know what was in the boxes, but I knew nobody dumps anything legally like that. Everything felt wrong. She kept feeling like she didn't understand the danger. She was standing way too close, like she thought she was some undercover reporter. I started speed walking toward her because something felt seriously off. Before I even reached her, she turned her head and saw me approaching. Her eyes went wide with this weird mix of relief and panic. Then she started running toward me. Running. Her phone was still recording. Her voice cracked as she shouted something I didn't understand at first. She begged me to pretend to be her boyfriend. I swear I thought I misheard her. She ran right up to me and grabbed my arm like we'd been together forever. She kept whispering fast, telling me to just play along, to smile at the camera, to not look scared. I didn't even get to ask her what she meant because she was shaking so hard she couldn't stand still. I looked over her shoulder. The two men had stopped moving. They were staring straight at us. One of them stepped closer, like he wasn't scared of anything. The other reached into his pocket, not fast, not slow, just controlled, intentional. That tiny movement made every hair on my body stand up. I didn't know if he was pulling out a knife or something worse, but my chest felt like it was collapsing. I whispered to her, asking what she had filmed. She whispered back that she was doing a vlog, a stupid vlog. She said she thought they were dumping rubbish, and she wanted to make content about pollution. She didn't know what was in the boxes. She didn't even think. She just filmed because she thought it would get views. She kept saying she didn't think they would care. But they cared. They cared a lot. One of the men started walking toward us properly now, the other one following behind. I could see something shiny in the second man's hand. I grabbed her arm and told her we needed to walk away fast, but she was frozen. Her phone was still recording. Her breathing was too loud. She kept whispering that she didn't mean anything, that she was just trying to film a vlog intro, that she didn't think they noticed. Then everything happened at once. Before the men reached us, before either of them could pull out whatever they were reaching for, the entire lakeside exploded with noise. Footsteps pounding. Police stormed the path like they'd been hiding in the trees waiting for an exact signal. Officers in vests ran from both sides of the lake, pointing toward the men, tackling them before they could run. The men didn't even get the chance to react. One was thrown to the ground so hard the gravel skidded under him. The other dropped something metallic that clattered against the stones. My date screamed and grabbed my arm tighter. Officers swarmed the whole area, dragging the men back up the slope, shouting into radios, blocking off the path. One officer pulled my date away from me fast because she still had her phone running. He told her firmly to stop recording and hand it over. She was shaking too hard to argue. Another officer approached me, asking if I was involved, asking if I was safe, asking if I knew the men. My voice wouldn't come out at first, but I finally said no. I didn't know anyone. I didn't know anything. I just came for a date. And then the part that messed me up hit. The officer told us she had accidentally been live streaming the entire thing. Not recording. Live streaming. To her followers. Her weird little online audience. She had pressed the wrong button in her rush to start filming and didn't realize the camera was broadcasting everything in real time. People watching her found the situation terrifying and called the police instantly, sending screenshots, location pins, descriptions. The officers hadn't been nearby. They arrived because her live stream went viral in minutes. She didn't even know. They had been watching the footage as they drove. They saw the boxes. They saw the men. They saw her running. They saw me show up confused. And they saw the men following us. I felt sick, properly sick. She started crying, not like someone who was sad, but like someone who realized way too late what she had filmed. She kept apologizing to the officers, saying she thought the boxes were rubbish, saying she didn't know they were doing something illegal, saying she just wanted a vlog clip. They kept telling her to calm down and breathe. One officer pulled us aside and said we needed to leave the area quietly because the men were connected to something serious, something they'd been investigating for a while. They didn't give details. They just told us to follow them to their car and wait. I kept staring at the lake. I kept thinking about those boxes sinking under the water. I kept thinking about how close the men got before the police came. And the thoughts that hit me hardest. She invited me there. She filmed them without thinking. She dragged me into it. And she had no idea she was live streaming the entire thing to hundreds of strangers while two men followed her with weapons. I swear if you'd asked me at the start of that night, I would have said it was the calmest, most boring date ever. Nothing creepy, nothing dramatic. Just a shy guy and a plate of food in a warm restaurant. The type of date you forget about after a week. The type that never turns into anything wild. That's honestly why everything that happened hit me so hard. because nothing about him screamed trouble. Nothing at all. We matched earlier that week. He messaged me in these short, soft sentences like he didn't want to annoy me. He wasn't trying to be funny or cool. He just sounded polite. He asked if I wanted to meet for dinner somewhere casual, and I said yes because I'd been stuck inside all week and needed something to break my brain out of being tired. He picked a quiet little restaurant near the station, the type with warm lights and wooden tables that wobble slightly when you lean on them. When I got there, he was already waiting outside. He waved with his tiny, awkward smile and pushed his glasses up his nose like he wasn't used to talking to people. He had the small black backpack on, nothing big, but he kept both hands on the straps like he was guarding it. I figured he was just shy or insecure or didn't know where to put his hands. I didn't think anything deeper than that. We sat down and ordered. He didn't talk much, but he was sweet. He asked about my day, read the menu way too seriously, laughed nervously at every joke I made. But the entire time, he never took his backpack off. Not even when he took his jacket off. He kept it on his lap at first, and when the starters came, he placed it gently on the empty chair next to him. Zipped tight. Positioned perfectly, like he wanted it always in reach. I noticed it, obviously, but I wasn't going to say anything because people have weird habits. Maybe he carried medication or something personal. Maybe he had a laptop he didn't want to drop. It wasn't my business. But he kept adjusting it. Every few minutes, he'd check the zipper. Then he'd check it again. And again. He'd tug it lightly, making sure it was closed. He stared at it more than he stared at me. His eyes flicked to it every time the waiter walked past. He even put his foot through the strap at one point like he didn't want anyone grabbing it. The whole time I kept telling myself I was imagining things. The food came, we ate. He relaxed a bit. He told me about his course, his job hunting, his hobbies. He wasn't weird. He wasn't rude. He wasn't twitchy like someone hiding something evil. He was just strangely attached to that backpack. Then halfway through the meal, he mumbled something about needing the toilet and stood up. The backpack stayed on the chair, zipped tight. He hesitated for a second before leaving it, staring at it like it was a pet he was forcing to stay behind. Then he walked away quickly. I didn't touch it. I didn't look inside it. I just sat there thinking maybe he had anxiety or something private he didn't want to explain. Then two staff members walked toward the table. I thought they were coming to ask if we needed anything. Instead, they whispered to each other while staring at the backpack. At first, I thought they were being nosy, but then one of them said quietly that this was the guy the other customer complained about. Something about a missing wallet. My stomach tightened. One of the staff leaned down slowly and grabbed the bag. Not casually. Carefully, like he'd been told to check it, but didn't want to get caught doing it. He unzipped it a tiny bit. I couldn't see inside from where I was sitting. Then he froze. He whispered something to the other staff member, who went wide-eyed and covered her mouth. The first guy zipped the bag back up instantly and told her to call the manager. Then he looked at me and asked if I knew what was inside. I said no, because I genuinely didn't. The manager came over fast. He was red-faced and sweating a bit, like something serious was happening behind the scenes. He opened the bag again, just enough to peek inside. Then he closed it slower this time, almost with disappointment. He said someone in the restaurant had reported their wallet missing earlier. A big one, thick, expensive looking. It had been in their coat pocket when they hung it on the back of their chair. Now it was gone. They'd seen my date standing near their table earlier when he walked in. I felt this horrible sinking feeling in my stomach. The manager told the staff quietly to call the police. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a calm instruction like he'd dealt with this kind of thing before. They didn't want to scare anyone. They didn't want my date running off if someone warned him. I didn't know what to do. Sit? Leave? Pretend I didn't exist. I just stayed still because everything was moving too fast and too slow at the same time. Then I heard footsteps. My date coming back from the bathroom. He walked toward the table smiling nervously like nothing was wrong, like he had no idea half the restaurant was watching him. He sat down and reached for his backpack like it was a habit. That's when the police walked in. Two officers stepped inside, talking to the manager. One pointed at my date. The other approached him carefully. My date froze with his hand still hovering over the backpack. He looked confused at first, then panicked, then scared. Not dangerous scared, caught scared. The officer asked him to stand up. He kept saying he didn't do anything. The officer asked about the backpack. He tried to grab it, but the officer stopped him. He looked around the restaurant at all the people staring, at me staring, at the manager pointing at his bag. They unzipped it fully and pulled out a thick leather wallet stuffed with cards and receipts and a small chunk of cash. The owner walked over instantly, shouting that it was his. He said he knew it was his because he got a picture of his kid tucked in the side pocket. The officer opened it. Same picture. My date's face dropped. He didn't even pretend it wasn't his bag. He just kept whispering that he needed money, that he wasn't a bad person, that he just thought nobody would notice. The officers cuffed him right there while customers stared in total silence. I just sat there completely frozen because the guy who spent the whole date being shy and polite, who kept saying sorry when he didn't need to, who laughed at my stupid jokes, was literally stealing from someone meters away and hiding it in the bag he guarded like it was his heart. They dragged him out through the doorway while he kept looking back at me like he wanted me to say something. Anything. But I couldn't. I didn't even know what to think. The manager apologized to me. The staff apologized too. They asked if I needed to call anyone. I just shook my head and left, walking home in this weird, floaty shock. The part that stuck with me wasn't the wallet. It was how gentle he looked when he guarded the backpack. How protective. Like the crime wasn't the act. It was losing whatever was inside. I swear the only reason I even agreed to meet her was because she had that kind of profile that looked harmless. Bright smile, messy hair, normal clothes, nothing edited or fake looking. She messaged first, saying she just moved into a new place and didn't know anyone in the area yet. She asked if I wanted to come over and chill because she was still unpacking and didn't want to go out. It sounded normal enough. People move all the time. I didn't think anything of it. She sent me the address, and it was only a short bus ride away, so I just went. I didn't even overthink it like I usually do. The building looked normal too. Not too fancy, not too rough. Just one of those random modern flats where every hallway looks the same at every door, has that identical silver handle. She buzzed me in instantly, like she'd been waiting right by the intercom. I got to the door, and she opened it with this huge smile like she was excited to see an actual human after unpacking all day. She seemed really nice. Talkative. She had that kind of friendly energy that makes you relax before you even step inside. But the second I entered, something felt off. At first, I couldn't figure out why. Everything looked new, which I expected if she'd literally just moved in. But it wasn't new like someone who'd spent the whole day unpacking. It was new like the furniture had arrived 20 minutes ago. Everything had shop tags on it. Everything. The sofa had one of those long plastic strips hanging off the side with the barcode still attached. The cushions had little cardboard tags with pictures of different color options. The dining table had a giant sticker on the leg that said sample. The lamp still had the protective plastic wrapped around the shade. Even the rug had a folded paper label stuck under the corner like nobody had even thought about cutting it off yet. She kept talking about how tired she was from unpacking, but there wasn't a single open box in sight. Not one. No tape. No bubble wrap. No clothes. No dishes. Nothing that suggested someone actually lived there. It looked like a furniture showroom, not a home. I stood near the sofa and pretended to admire it just so I could take a closer look without being obvious. The stitching was perfect. The cushions were puffed like they'd never been sat on. The tag said new collection on it. She handed me a drink, a bottled one thankfully, and told me to sit. I sat down slowly because even the sofa felt stiff, like nobody had ever used it. She sat across from me, but kept glancing around the room as if she was checking whether anything looked out of place. I asked how long she'd been there, and she said since that morning. She said the moving men left late and she hadn't even finished setting up. But the place wasn't half done. It wasn't messy. It wasn't lived in at all. It was too clean, too perfect, too staged. And the biggest red flag hit when I looked at the coffee table. It still had the price sticker on it. Not a small one either. A huge bright label stuck right on the top of the glass. She hadn't even tried to peel it off. I started feeling uneasy, like something wasn't matching up in my head. I looked around slowly, pretending to admire the place, but all I saw were more tags. Tags on chairs. Tags on a lamp. Tags on the bedside table visible through the open door. Tags on the blanket folded on the armchair. She kept talking about how stressful the move was, But she wasn't even sweating. Her hair wasn't messy from lifting boxes. Her hands didn't have dust or anything on them. She looked way too relaxed for someone who supposedly just moved into an empty flat that morning. I decided to ask where she lived before this. She paused. Not a natural pause. A pause like she had to come up with an answer. She said something vague about back home and changed the subject immediately, asking if I wanted to watch something. Before we could even start anything, I heard voices in the hallway. Not random voices. Voices saying focused things. Purposeful things. Then someone knocked on the door. Not a normal knock. A strong, controlled knock. Her face dropped for half a second. Not fear. More like annoyance, like she'd been interrupted. She told me to wait and walk to the door. She only opened it a tiny bit and whispered something to whoever was outside, but they didn't whisper back. They pushed the door all the way open. Police. 3 officers stepped inside before she could do anything. One grabbed her arm gently but firmly, guiding her away from the doorway. The other 2 scanned the room, their eyes landing on me but not accusingly, just checking if I was safe. I stood up immediately with my hands slightly raised because I had no clue what was happening. One officer told me I wasn't in trouble and to stay where I was. The girl kept saying it was a misunderstanding, that she hadn't done anything, but her voice was shaky now. Not confident like earlier. Shaky like she knew exactly why they were there. One officer asked her whose flat this was. She didn't answer. Another officer walked into the bedroom and called out that nothing in the flat belonged to her. No clothes. No personal items. No toiletries. No mail. Nothing with her name on it. Nothing showing she lived there. Because she didn't. She hadn't moved in that morning. She had broken in. The flat belonged to someone who was out of the country. The owner had a camera system connected to their phone. They got an alert when someone forced the lock that morning. They called building security and then the police. The officers had been looking for her all afternoon. She wasn't unpacking. She was staging. Using the furniture she dragged in from some nearby storage space and leaving the tags on because she didn't care about keeping it. But the part that messed me up the most was why they said she used a dating app. Apparently, she'd been inviting people over, different people every time. So if anyone saw lights on or movement inside, it would look like someone lived there. She wanted it to seem like the flat was hers. She wanted witnesses. She wanted noise and traffic and proof. I was part of her cover story. Nothing more. They escorted her out while she kept talking fast, saying she didn't mean anything bad, saying she just needed a place to stay, saying she didn't hurt anyone. She looked at me once as they pulled her into the hallway. Not sorry, not embarrassed, just annoyed, like I'd ruined the set she spent all day building. An officer gave me a ride home because I was so thrown off I couldn't think straight. The image that stuck with me the most wasn't the police with yelling or the officers checking each room. It was the tags. All those untouched tags hanging off every piece of furniture in a flat she didn't belong in. And knowing she didn't care how long she fooled me as long as someone walked through that door and made it look real. I should have trusted the weird vibe I got the second I met him, but I told myself I was being dramatic. He seemed normal on the app. Nothing special, nothing creepy. He typed like a shy guy who didn't want to bother anyone. He asked if I wanted to grab food at this small restaurant near the center, the kind with yellow lights and tiny tables shoved close together. I said yes because I hadn't been out all week, and I wanted something to distract me. He was already outside when I arrived, standing like he didn't know what to do with his hands. He waved too fast when he saw me, like he'd been practicing it. I thought it was cute at first. He kept smiling at the pavement like he was nervous. Then he asked for a selfie. Before we even walked in. I laughed it off because some guys do that for fun, that the way he positioned me was strange. Instead of standing next to me normally, he gently moved my shoulder with this awkward, stiff touch and angled me so that I was facing the flats across the street. He raised his phone and took a picture of us, but his eyes weren't on the camera. They were looking slightly past me, like he was checking something behind my head. I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just weird with photos. We sat down inside. The restaurant was warm and smelled like sizzling oil and garlic. The lights were low, and the windows were huge, showing the entire opposite building perfectly. I didn't think much of it until he asked for another selfie. Then another. Then another. He wasn't even pretending to be subtle about it. He would lean across the table, smiling like it was the cutest thing in the world, and then lightly push my chair so my back was turned toward the window. Every single time. He moved my chin a tiny bit too, tilting it to a specific angle like he was trying to get the perfect shot. While taking each picture, he would glance past me for half a second. Not at me. Not at the screen. Behind me. After the fifth selfie, I joked about him being obsessed, but he didn't laugh. He said he just liked capturing moments. His voice was soft but too quick, like he had prepared the line before I even asked. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly between each picture, even though he tried to hide it by resting his phone on the table. I checked the big window behind me. The building across the road had tons of flats with lights on. Some had curtains open. Some had balconies. Nothing special. Nothing that stood out. But he kept aiming his phone in the exact same direction every single time. I wasn't stupid. I could feel something off. I tried to pay attention to the way the room reflected in his phone screen when he opened the camera. Just for a second, I caught a tiny blur of a figure in one of the windows of the building opposite. Someone standing very still. Too still. Then his thumb covered the screen again. I felt sick for a second. Not scared, just extremely aware. When the waitress came to ask what we wanted, he suddenly acted rushed. He ordered fast, eyes darting back to the window every time someone pushed the door open. He kept brushing his sleeve like dirt was on it, but there was nothing there. I asked him how his day was, but he barely heard the question. He kept glancing at his phone screen, checking the time, checking the window, checking the angle. Then he asked for another selfie. I didn't want to, but saying no felt like it would snap something in him, so I leaned in again. This time I watched his reflection closely. His smile didn't move, but his eyes did, straight through the window, straight at that same apartment, straight at that still figure who wasn't moving at all. And that's when everything exploded. The door swung open, slamming against the wall so hard the cutlery on the tables rattled. Everyone in the restaurant jumped. 3 officers rushed inside, not shouting but moving fast enough that you could feel the panic behind them. 2 pointed at my date immediately. 1 told him to step away from the table. He didn't even look surprised. He just closed his eyes like he was annoyed it took them that long. They grabbed him right there, shoved him against the wall. 1 officer kept saying something into his radio while the others searched him. The whole restaurant went silent except for chairs scraping and people breathing too loud. I stood up because I didn't know if they thought I was involved. 1 officer told me I was in trouble but asked me to stay back. He said it calmly, but his eyes kept darting between the guy and the window behind us. The truth came up fast. The apartment window he kept angling me toward wasn't random. It belonged to an undercover surveillance team watching someone across the street. The guy I was with had been spotted earlier taking pictures of the building at weird angles. He didn't know exactly which window the team was using, so he used me to get better shots. Every selfie wasn't a selfie. It was him mapping sightlines without looking suspicious. He wanted the background, not me. The surveillance team had already clocked him from earlier, when the restaurant called 999 because someone said a guy kept filming people outside. The police realized it was the same person interfering with the operation. They tracked him to the restaurant through the cameras outside. Apparently, he'd been selling info about undercover teams before. Angles, window positions, how often officers switched out, which flats were active. He matched with random women and dragged them into it without them knowing, using them as cover to take pictures so he didn't look suspicious doing it alone. I felt physically sick when I read one of the officers flip through his phone. The pictures weren't even of us. Every single selfie was cropped around me. His focus was zoomed behind me, on the surveillance window, on the officers, on their equipment. He barely looked at me once during any of those pictures. They pulled him out of the restaurant quickly. He didn't fight it. He gave me a tiny smile on the way out like he was proud of himself for getting as many angles as he did before they caught him. The officer next to me said I was lucky. If the team across the road had seen his phone aimed at their window one more time, they would have assumed he was working with whoever they were watching. And I would have been in the frame too, not as a date, as an accomplice. I walked home shaking, not because he lied, not because he used me, but because he kept smiling in every picture like he was having fun, while the whole time he was using my face to hide what he really wanted. I was never the focus, just the cover blocking their view. I still don't know at what exact moment the whole thing flipped from normal to completely insane, because the night started in the most standard way ever. I matched with this girl who actually seemed chilled. She wasn't pushing for anything weird. She wasn't acting like she wanted something serious. She just asked if I wanted to come over and watch something since she didn't feel like going out. Her messages were normal, straight to the point, and nothing about her gave off a weird vibe. Her building was one of those long, narrow flats where every hallway echo makes it sound like someone's walking behind you. I buzzed her door, she told me to come up, and I went to the second floor. The corridor smelled like a mix of someone cooking and someone cleaning, that weird blend of spices and bleach that old flats always have. I walked toward her place, trying not to overthink everything like I usually do on dates. She opened the door before I even knocked. She looked the same as her pics, maybe even a bit better, and she gave me this quick smile like she was happy I didn't bail. Everything felt normal. Completely normal. She stepped aside and told me to come in. The moment I took one step inside, the whole world flipped. Two men burst out of the hallway closet like someone had launched them out with a spring. I didn't even have time to step back. Both of them were holding cameras, big ones, not little phone cameras. Actual equipment. Ring lights strapped on, straps around their necks. One guy shouted something about getting it on tape, and the other kept yelling to look scared. I froze so hard I swear my brain shut off. I couldn't even process what was happening. I thought they were robbing the place. I thought they were going to attack me. I didn't know if they were with her or after me. I literally spun around like an idiot looking for the quickest way to run without tripping over myself. The girl didn't scream. She didn't look scared. She didn't even flinch. She laughed. Like she was watching some inside joke she had seen 100 times before. She just leaned against the wall with her arms crossed, smiling like she was proud of it. Proud of them. Proud of getting me. The two guys kept shouting instructions to each other while filming me from different angles. One of them backed into a shoe rack while trying to zoom in and nearly fell over. The other guy kept saying the light wasn't right and tried to turn the lamp toward me. I was still frozen in the middle of the hallway trying to figure out what exactly they wanted. I finally got out one sentence, asking what they were doing, but they didn't listen. They didn't even look at me properly. It was like I wasn't a person. I was an object to record, a prop, a reaction. The girl finally walked over, smiling like she was introducing friends at a birthday party. She said it was just a prank and not to get upset. She said they had a channel where they recorded stage break-ins for fun. She said their viewers loved seeing people freak out. I swear her tone made my skin crawl because she genuinely didn't see anything wrong with jumping innocent people with cameras. She thought it was funny. She thought it was content. She didn't ask me, didn't warn me, didn't even check if I was comfortable with anything. I wasn't a date. I was a subject. I was material. I stepped back again because something in me flipped. I didn't care about being polite anymore. I didn't want to sit down or talk to them or pretend like this was normal. I just wanted to leave. But when I got to the doorway, the two guys came running toward me again, not to hurt me but to film my exit. One crouched in front of me holding the camera like it was some emotional moment they needed to capture. At that point, I felt my whole body heating up with pure panic. I tried to push past them, but the hallway was too narrow and the cameras kept brushing against my face. I felt trapped. Properly trapped. Like the walls were closing in. Then someone banged on the wall next door so hard the whole hallway shook. A neighbor shouted something through the wall. Another door opened further down. Someone else yelled that they'd called the police because they thought a real break-in was happening. The girl and the two guys froze for the first time since I arrived. The one holding the biggest camera whispered that they should hide the equipment. The girl told him to calm down. The other guy kept saying they needed the footage before leaving. I wanted to laugh because they weren't scared of the neighbors or the yelling. They were only scared about losing content. Then everything happened in seconds. Police officers rushed into the building, boots hitting the stairs fast. Voices echoing. Orders being shouted. The girl's face dropped instantly. She told her friends to hide in the closet again. I genuinely couldn't believe what I was hearing. They actually tried to stuff themselves back inside the small closet like they could reverse the whole situation if they hid long enough. The officers reached the door just as one of the guys tripped over a tripod trying to squeeze back into the closet. The girl tried to block the doorway, but they pushed past her easily. One officer grabbed the guy with the camera first, pinning him against the wall. Another officer pulled the other one out of the closet by his jacket like he was some kid hiding from homework. The girl kept saying it was all staged and that she didn't understand why people were upset. She said it was harmless. She said nobody was in danger. She said I was overreacting. She looked at me like she expected me to defend her, like we were in on this together. I didn't say a word. The police confiscated everything, the cameras, the lights, even the mic taped to the inside of the closet door. The hallway was a mess of geared and tangled wires. The girl kept trying to explain that it was for entertainment, but the officers looked genuinely fed up. One of them said they'd had reports about similar stunts from the same group before, and they were already warned to stop doing it. I stepped out of the flat while they were still arguing. The door was open, the chaos behind me echoing down the hallway. Neighbors were peeking out of their rooms. Someone shook their head at me as I walked past like they felt sorry for me. I got outside and didn't stop walking until I was halfway home. My legs were shaking the entire way. Later that night, I read something online about prank channels getting shut down, people doing crazy things just to get reactions. But the part that stuck with me was how calm she looked when they jumped out of the closet. How happy she was. How normal it felt to her. I wasn't a date to her. I was content she hadn't recorded yet. I swear this whole thing still feels like it happened in some dream where everything looks normal until it suddenly isn't. I wasn't even planning to meet anyone that day. I'd been scrolling out of boredom and matched with this guy who honestly seemed harmless. He wasn't loud, he wasn't weird, he wasn't trying to act too confident. He typed like he was scared of saying the wrong thing. He kept apologizing if he replied too slow. He even asked me twice if I was sure I wanted to meet, like he really didn't want to waste my time. For some reason that made me feel safe, which is kind of stupid now that I look back at it. He suggested a small cafe that wasn't too busy, and I thought, okay, whatever, a quick drink won't kill me. I got there a bit early because I didn't want to be that person rushing in out of breath. He was already inside, sitting by the window, posture small, hands in his lap, like he was trying to take up as little space as possible. He stood up when he saw me and nearly knocked over his drink because he moved too fast. I laughed because I thought it was cute, and he turned bright red. He talked quietly, but he had decent manners, opening the door for me when I came in and pushing the chair lightly so I could sit. He kept saying sorry like every 2 minutes, even for stuff he didn't need to apologize for. I honestly thought he was one of those sweet, awkward guys that only exist on the internet. The date was normal. Painfully normal. He asked about my job, talked about his hobbies, laughed nervously when I made jokes. He barely touched his drink, though. I thought maybe he was just anxious. He checked his phone a few times, but not in a rude way, more like he was expecting some message he didn't want to get. Every time it buzzed, he tensed up a bit, then forced a smile. When we finished, he asked if I wanted to walk for a bit because he said the fresh air would help him relax. I didn't mind. The cafe street was quiet, the type where cars pass every few minutes but not constantly. We started walking, and that's when I noticed it. A white van crawling behind us. Slow, too slow. Not like normal traffic. At first I thought it was someone looking for parking. Then I thought maybe it wasn't following us at all. But every corner we turned, it turned too, keeping the same steady creeping pace. I looked at him to see if he noticed. He definitely did. He kept glancing back without trying to be obvious. His shoulders were stiff now, not shy, not nervous shy, but tense in a different way, like he was bracing for something. I asked if he was okay, and he nodded way too fast. He said everything was fine, which made it 1,000 times worse because he said it so quickly it didn't sound real. We crossed the street, and the van followed again. My stomach dropped. I tried to act normal, but my mind was spiraling. I wondered if he had an ex following him or if he was in some family drama. I tried to slow down my steps, and he slowed too. When he walked, he kept adjusting his jacket like he was checking something in the pockets. Then he started speeding up a bit, not enough to break into a run, but enough that I had to match him. The van matched us again, crawling, watching. That's when police cars showed up. I didn't even hear sirens. They came out of nowhere, one from the side street, another from the main road, boxing the van and before the driver could react. Doors flew open. Officers shouted. The guy beside me froze like he'd been turned to stone. For a second, I thought the police were after the van driver. But then one officer pointed straight at my date, and everything went insane. They grabbed him before he could step away. Two officers pinned his arms, another pressed him against the car bonnet. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just kept repeating that he didn't do anything. The van driver, who turned out to be another officer, stepped out wearing a vest and tapped a radio on his shoulder, shaking his head like the whole thing was obvious. I backed up fast because I didn't want to be in the middle of any of it. People walking by stopped and stared. A woman across the street took a picture before another officer shouted at her not to. Someone finally explained it to me, and I swear my brain nearly shut off. The guy I had just spent an hour talking to had committed a robbery minutes before meeting me. Like literally minutes. He wasn't shy. He wasn't nervous about me. He was pumped full of adrenaline and trying to act normal. He set up the date purposely close to where the robbery happened so that if he got stopped, he could say he'd been with me the whole time. The police had already been tracking him because of another incident earlier that week, and the van had been tailing him the entire time. I thought he matched with me because he liked my profile or whatever. He matched with me because I lived close. That was it. I wasn't a date. I wasn't a person he wanted to meet. I was his alibi. The officers found a bag stuffed into his jacket with cash still bound in tight stacks. His hands were shaking, not because of the date, but because he'd literally just robbed a small store 3 streets away. The owner had called it in instantly and described him. The van had spotted him going into the cafe, but waited until he walked back out so they wouldn't risk people inside getting hurt. The weirdest part was how he looked at me while they dragged him into the police car. Not angry, not embarrassed, just disappointed, like I'd ruined his plan even though I didn't do anything. After they took him away, one officer apologized for scaring me and said I wasn't in any danger, but honestly that didn't help. I kept thinking about how normal he acted, how gentle, how polite, how carefully he pretended to be shy. And the whole time he was just waiting for me to stand next to him long enough so he could say we were together when everything went down. I read about the case later online, and it turned out he'd been doing similar things for months. Matching with girls, arranging quick meetups, using them as cover for whatever he was planning. I was just the next target. Nothing more than a moving timestamp he could point to. The scariest part is the robbery. It's knowing he chose me before I even knew he existed. I swear the whole thing started feeling weird before anything even happened. Like the air around her felt tense in a way I couldn't explain. When I matched with her, she seemed chilled enough. Nothing strange in the chat. She wasn't too dry. She wasn't too crazy. She just asked if I wanted to meet for a quick bite in this small place that was always half full, never too loud, never too empty. I said yeah, because I didn't have anything better going on and she seemed normal enough from what I saw. When I got to the restaurant, she was already there sitting at a table near the back wall. She didn't look up when I walked in. She wasn't on her phone either. She was staring across the room like she was watching a TV show. I walked over, said hi, and she snapped out of it so fast it actually made me flinch. She smiled like she wanted to seem relaxed, but her eyes were still locked onto something else, flicking back and forth behind me. I sat down and tried to be normal about it. She talked, but not properly. She spoke in half sentences because every time someone laughed or moved, she turned her head like she needed to see who it was. She asked me what my job was, and before I even finished, she twisted her neck to stare past me again. It wasn't even subtle. It was like she didn't care that I could see her doing it. I read her eyes move to the same spot over and over, so I looked. That's when I noticed the couple. They were sitting a few tables away, talking normally, eating, not even acting suspicious or loud. Nothing special about them, but she was locked onto them like they were the most important people in the entire room. She leaned forward slightly every time one of them moved their hand or turned their head. I tried to laugh about it, asked if she knew them, but she didn't answer. She didn't even blink. She just kept staring so hard it made me uncomfortable. I thought maybe she was jealous or insecure, or maybe she thought the guy looked familiar. But it wasn't that. It wasn't that vibe at all. It was way deeper and way more intense, like she needed to see something happen. At one point she pulled her phone out and placed it face down on the table, but at a weird angle. Not like she wanted it away from her, like she was positioning it, lining it up. I looked closer and noticed the camera was facing the couple. The phone wasn't flat on the table. She had propped the bottom edge slightly on her napkin, giving the camera a clear angle across the room. My chest tightened a bit because it clicked. She wasn't just staring, she was recording them. I didn't say anything because I didn't even know how to start that conversation. What do you even say to someone you just met who is filming strangers without blinking? I tried to change the subject, but she didn't care. She kept doing that thing where she pretended to be listening, but her eyes were glued to them. The couple eventually noticed. The girl was the first to pick up on it. She kept glancing our way, shifting in her seat, whispering to the guy. I watched her whisper something sharp because her whole posture changed. She started looking annoyed. The guy turned his head and spotted my date staring straight at them without even trying to hide it. He said something to the waitress and pointed in our direction. Now I was panicking because I didn't want them thinking I was involved in whatever she was doing. I leaned away from her slightly, hoping it would make it obvious that I had nothing to do with anything she was filming. My date didn't even look embarrassed when she got caught. She didn't pretend to look away. She didn't act shy. She just kept staring like she was waiting for the couple to do something specific, like she needed them to argue or get loud or react. The tension got so heavy that the couple finally stood up and walked over. The girl was clearly upset, asking why my date was watching them. The guy asked if she was recording. My date didn't answer. She just looked at them with this blank expression, like nothing they said mattered. Her hand was resting lightly on her phone, but she didn't try to hide it or move it away. I stood up a bit because I didn't want to be sitting down in the middle of whatever was about to happen. I tried to tell the couple I wasn't with her like that I literally met her half an hour ago, but my voice came out shaky because the whole situation didn't feel normal. The couple kept focusing on her, though. The girl told her to stop staring. The guy asked if she filmed them before. My date finally spoke, but her voice was strange, flat, almost bored. She said they weren't doing anything interesting yet. That's when the couple got angry. Not shouting angry, but the type of angry where their faces go red and they start talking fast. They demanded she delete whatever she recorded. They told the staff. They told the manager. The whole restaurant started watching. My date still didn't move. She looked at them like they were inconveniences, like they were ruining something she was timing. Then, just as the couple looked ready to grab her phone, someone outside shouted something and the entire entrance flooded with police. Not one or two officers, loads, like they were already searching for her before any of this even started. Everyone in the restaurant backed up. One officer pointed at my date and said her full name out loud. She didn't even react. They grabbed her from behind before she could stand up, pinning her arms, taking her phone, checking under her jacket for other devices. She didn't fight. She didn't ask why. She didn't even look scared. The officer talking to the manager explained everything in this low, tired voice like he'd been dealing with her for weeks. He said she had been following random couples she met online, not for romance, not for dating, but to observe them. She'd been matching with hundreds of people just to collect footage of couples interacting. She'd sit near them, record conversations, track them home, film arguments, and log it all on some so-called social experiment app she made herself. She wasn't even posting the videos. She was collecting them, studying them, building profiles of couples she didn't know. The scariest part was hearing how long she had been doing it, how many places she'd been banned from, how many couples had reported her, how she always acted calm, never aggressive, just watching and recording like she was studying animals in a cage. They dragged her out of the restaurant, her face completely blank. No expression, no fear, nothing. I walked home feeling sick because the whole time she sat with me, she wasn't thinking about the date. She wasn't thinking about me at all. She was waiting for the couple behind us to argue. I'm not even gonna lie, this started out feeling like the most normal date I'd been on in ages. Like one of those evenings where everything actually lines up for once. I'd matched with this guy who honestly seemed too smooth for real life. Not in a creepy way, just confident. He wasn't dragging the convo or leaving me on red for hours. He asked decent questions. He actually sounded funny, and he suggested this restaurant that I'd walked past 100 times but never tried. The place wasn't fancy. It was one of those warm-looking spots with dim lights and wooden tables, the type where you think the food is secretly really good, even if the menu looks basic. When I got there, I was low-key nervous because I'd hyped him up in my head. He was already inside, waiting at a table near the window. He looked the same as his pictures, which almost shocked me because that rarely happens anymore. Same hair, same smile, same clothes style. He stood up when he saw me and did this little wave that made him look way more friendly than online. Straight away, he talked like we'd known each other longer than a day. He had this kind of easy energy, the type that makes you relax without even thinking. He kept making jokes about the menu, and the waitress seemed to recognize him because she smiled at him in this quick way before leaving us. I didn't think much of it. The food smelled good, the place was warm, and he didn't give off any weird vibes. It felt like a date that might actually go somewhere. Then the first weird thing happened. Every time someone walked out of the kitchen, he looked up too fast. Not like he was nervous, more like he was checking who they were. He would swipe his hair back each time, like he was trying to be casual but failing miserably. I still didn't think anything serious was wrong. I thought maybe he worked nearby and didn't want to bump into people he knew. Then the second weird thing happened. The manager kept walking past our table, not to talk to us, not to check on us, just to stare at him, not even at me. Only him, and not a friendly stare. It was a slow, scanning stare, the type you do when you're trying to remember where you've seen someone before. He ignored it, but I saw his jaw tense up slightly every time. I tried to keep the conversation going, but the atmosphere around him started feeling tight. He wasn't as relaxed anymore. He kept tapping his shoe on the floor while talking. His eyes darted around the room like he was waiting for something or someone. When the waitress came back to take our order, she didn't look at me. She stared right at him, eyes wide, and then quickly looked away. She whispered something to another worker near the bar, but they weren't as quiet as they thought. I heard one word clearly. Him. My stomach twisted a little because something was definitely off now. I leaned back in my chair and watched him carefully. He kept smiling at me, but it didn't reach his eyes anymore. He wasn't fully looking at me either. His gaze kept flicking toward the kitchen door. Then the third weird thing happened. The kitchen door swung open a bit too hard, and 3 workers came out at the same time. Not casually. Not carrying food. They were looking for someone, and they found him. Instantly. Their eyes locked on him like they'd been rehearsing it. My day froze. It was the smallest movement, but I saw it. His shoulders dropped for half a second, like he knew exactly what was about to happen. He glanced at me one last time, almost like he was calculating if he could use me as a shield or a distraction. Something cold ran through my whole body when I caught that look. One of the workers shouted something, and then everything went chaotic. They rushed toward our table so fast, I didn't even have time to stand. They grabbed him from behind, 2 of them pinning his arms down while another slammed him onto the floor near the empty table beside us. He started yelling, not scared yelling, but angry yelling, like he was annoyed they caught him. The chairs fell over, glasses rattled, people around us jumped back or covered their mouths. I backed up so fast I hit the wall. One worker was shouting for someone to call the police. The manager came running with his phone already out, talking into it like he had been waiting for this exact moment. Customers were staring, whispering, some of them pulling out their phones but getting told to stop recording by the staff. I had no idea what was happening. None. I thought maybe it was a misunderstanding or he owed money or something random like that. But then one of the workers said something I will never forget. He said this wasn't the first time the guy tried to sneak into the restaurant. He said earlier that same day the guy came in through the staff entrance wearing an apron he bought somewhere cheap, pretending he worked there. He tried to blend in with them. He walked straight into the kitchen like he belonged there, but they caught him because nobody recognized him. When they confronted him, he ran out before they could grab him. They had been waiting for him to come back. I looked at my date, still pinned to the floor, and suddenly everything made sense. The too smooth energy. The weird eye contact with the staff. The way he looked familiar to the waitress. The manager staring him down like he'd seen his face somewhere before. They weren't looking at him because he was handsome. They were looking at him because he was the same guy who had tried sneaking into their kitchen hours earlier pretending to work there. The police arrived fast. They dragged him up from the floor while he kept trying to act innocent, saying he had no idea what they were talking about, but the workers kept shouting over him. One officer pulled him out of the restaurant while people moved out of the way. He didn't look back at me again. The manager came over after and apologized, but his eyes were still wide like he couldn't believe the situation either. He said the guy didn't just sneak in. He had wandered around the back rooms, checking doors, touching drawers, looking around like he was searching for something or someone. They couldn't figure out what he wanted. They thought maybe he was trying to steal something until they caught him staring at the till area and he bolted. I walked home in this weird daze where everything felt half real. My mind kept replaying the moment he looked at me right before they grabbed him. Like he wasn't sorry, like he was annoyed he got interrupted. The whole thing messed with my head because he didn't act like someone who thought he'd done something wrong. He acted like someone who got caught doing something he planned to finish later. I swear this started in the most normal way ever. Nothing weird, nothing dramatic. I was sitting on my bed, scrolling through random profiles, not even expecting to match with anyone. Then this girl popped up. She looked kind of familiar, but not in a creepy way. More like someone I might have seen around town or maybe on someone's story ages ago. She messaged first, which honestly never happens to me, and she was actually decent at keeping the conversation going. Nothing flirty or too much, just chilled. She suggested meeting at this restaurant near the high street. It wasn't fancy or anything, more like a cheap place where people go after work to grab something quick. I thought, cool, that's calm. I got ready and left early because I didn't want to look rushed or late. On the way there, I kept thinking about how weirdly familiar she looked in her pictures, but I couldn't place it. Maybe she looked like someone from sixth form, or maybe I had seen her in a shop once. Nothing clicked. When I got close to the restaurant, I felt this weird heaviness in my chest. Not like fear, more like something was about to be wrong, but I didn't know what yet. I walked inside, and the first thing I noticed was how the staff looked at me. Usually you get a quick glance, and that's it, but these people stared like they read my whole life. One of the guys behind the counter actually froze for a second. He didn't even hide it. I thought I had something on my face or maybe my hair looked crazy. I checked my phone reflection, but I looked normal enough. I walked to the counter anyway, trying to pretend I didn't notice them staring. Then I saw it. My own face. On the wall behind the counter. It was one of those cheap laminated posters, stuck onto a corkboard with other random notices. At first I thought I was going insane. I literally blinked twice to make sure it was actually me. The picture was one I took like a year ago when I was messing around with my camera. I know that picture because I deleted it from my socials ages ago. And there it was, printed on a poster with some text underneath. And next to that one were two more pictures of me. All from old accounts I didn't even use anymore. My stomach felt like it fell straight down. I stepped closer and noticed words printed under the photos, like warnings. Something about being careful if someone shows you these pictures because multiple men have been scammed by someone using them. Something about reporting it to the police. Something about a girl luring people in. I stepped back fast because my mind couldn't process it. I didn't understand how my pictures ended up on a wall like that. Then it hit me. The girl I matched with. The one who looked familiar. Not because I'd seen her on a night out or whatever. Familiar because she used my face. She used my pictures to scam people. She had probably been running profiles with my identity before she randomly matched with me. That's why she knew exactly how to talk. She'd been pretending to be me for who knows how long. The guy behind the counter walked slowly towards me like he didn't want to freak me out. He didn't say anything though. He just kept glancing at the posters, then at me, then at the front door. I noticed him quietly pressing something under the counter with his left hand. Some kind of alert button. He tried to make it subtle, but I saw it clearly. I looked around the restaurant and noticed people whispering. I didn't know if they recognized my face from the posters or if they thought I was some criminal. I felt my throat tighten because it suddenly made sense why the girl asked to meet there specifically. She didn't pick it randomly. She wanted to see me in person. She wanted to see the face she'd been using online. Or maybe she wanted to grab new pictures without me knowing. One of the staff members pointed discreetly toward the back entrance like he wanted me to walk away from the main door. I didn't move though. I felt stuck. Everything felt too unreal to respond to. My heart was pounding hard and my head was buzzing. A minute later, I heard sirens outside. Not loud ones. Those muted ones they use when they're pulling out quietly. Officers stepped out of their cars fast but coordinated like they already knew exactly what was going on. Two came into the restaurant while the others stayed outside. The girl wasn't even there yet. She hadn't arrived. But the staff had obviously contacted the police before about the posters, and maybe they were expecting her to show up sooner or later. One officer walked up to me and asked if I was the person in the posters. I nodded slowly because there was no point pretending otherwise. He didn't look at me like I'd done something wrong. He looked at me like I'd been dragged into something I didn't even know existed. He started asking questions about the girl I matched with, how she contacted me, what time we planned to meet. I answered everything, still trying to make sense of it all. While they were talking to me, another officer walked around the restaurant showing the girl's profile picture to the staff. They all said they'd seen her before, that she'd come in with different guys every time. Always sitting near the back, always acting friendly, always leaving alone. Some of the guys she brought in read the posters after and realized they'd been scammed or manipulated. Some had money taken from them. Some had their info stolen. She played the part perfectly. When she finally showed up, it was almost anticlimactic. She walked past the windows like she was just on a normal date. Not hiding her face, not acting weird. But the moment she stepped through the door and saw the officers inside, she froze. Her eyes went straight to me, and for a second, she looked at me like I wasn't even a real person. Like I was some character she made up who somehow stepped out of a screen. She turned to run, but the officers were already behind her. They grabbed her before she even made it to the pavement. She didn't scream or fight back. She just kept glancing at me like I'd betrayed her even though I didn't know anything about any of this. They took her away and kept asking me more questions. I answered everything, but my mind was still stuck on one thing. How long had she been using my pictures? How many people thought they met me when they actually met her? How many places had my face been in without me being there? I walked home feeling like someone had been living the whole other life using my identity. And the scariest part was how normal she looked when she walked through that door. How casual she acted. How she thought she could keep doing it forever. I didn't even want to go on that date. That's the funny part. I'd had one of those long, annoying days where everything goes wrong for no reason, and I was honestly planning to stay home, eat whatever I had left in the fridge, and fall asleep watching something random. Then she messaged me. She'd matched with me the night before and barely spoke, but suddenly she was super active, asking if I wanted to come over and just chill because she didn't like going out when she was tired. I should have said no, but my brain was too drained to think straight, so I just said yes. I thought it would be calm and low effort. Her building was one of those strange blocks where the hallways smell like microwave meals and cleaning spray mixed together. The kind of place where you know the walls are way too thin. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she had been standing right behind it. She smiled, but it was one of those smiles that don't fit the face properly, like she was trying to hold it up. Her makeup looked a bit rushed, like she put it on in bad lighting. The flat was small and warm, almost too warm, and had this random sweet smell, like fake vanilla. Weird thing was she didn't invite me to sit on the sofa. She sort of waved her hand at it, but then she kept walking around like she was tidying up last minute, even though it already looked tidy enough. She talked fast too, about random stuff, and every minute or two she'd say she needed to use the bathroom for a second. The first time she went, I thought maybe she was just nervous. The second time I thought maybe she was doing some makeup fixing. But by the third time she said she had to check something and rush off again, I started noticing how strange everything felt. It wasn't like she was trying to get away from me. It was like she was checking something else. I sat on the sofa and tried to focus on the movie she put on, but it felt like the room itself was watching me. Everything felt way too staged. Candles lit but barely smelling like anything, cushions propped perfectly, no clutter anywhere. Even the snacks were all opened already and placed on a plate like she didn't want me touching any packets. I kept looking around because something felt off, like there was an extra layer to the room I wasn't seeing. That's when I noticed the plant. It was this tall, fake-looking plant in the corner next to a low shelf. Something about it just didn't fit the room. The leaves had dust on them, but the pot looked new, and behind one of the leaves I saw a small white shape. At first I thought it was part of the plant's decoration or some light reflection, but when I leaned forward a bit, I realized what it actually was. A baby monitor camera. Not even the newer kind. One of those older ones with a round lens and a blinking light on the side. The light was on, and the lens was pointed straight at the sofa, straight at where I was sitting. I froze in the most pathetic way. My entire body locked up because everything suddenly made sense. The setup look, her running in and out, the weird smell, the perfect lighting, the open snacks, the way she kept checking her phone between her bathroom trips. I didn't want to jump up and freak out like she was just paranoid and watching herself or something, but then I leaned forward just enough to see the brand on the camera and my stomach dropped. That model only streamed one way, live. I tried to act normal, so I grabbed a piece of popcorn like nothing was happening, but my hand was shaking slightly. I could hear her in the bathroom moving around quickly, opening and closing drawers. I looked back at the plant and the angle of the camera, and the realization hit me so hard I almost stood up without thinking. She wasn't streaming the room for safety. She was streaming me. I kept my head facing the screen, but my eyes moved around the room. There were no baby items, nothing that suggested she owned an actual monitor for any real reason. The only purpose it had was surveillance, and the lens wasn't dusty like the plant. It looked cleaned, like someone wiped it right before I arrived. I reached down to adjust my shoe just so I could look under the shelf it was sitting on. There were wires tucked behind it, running into a cheap adapter with a sticker on it. That's when I noticed something even worse. The camera wasn't just streaming. It was connected to a receiver that wasn't meant for private Wi-Fi. It was hooked into something else. I tried to process everything at once and failed. She came back out of the bathroom with this over-happy smile that felt even more fake now that I knew what she was doing. She sat on the arm of the sofa instead of next to me and kept glancing at the plant like she was checking if it was still working. Her phone buzzed and she grabbed it way too fast, eyes scanning the screen like she was searching for approval. I didn't know how to bring it up without getting into something dangerous. I didn't know if she was doing it alone or if someone else was watching with her. But right as I was about to make up some excuse to leave, everything exploded. Heavy boots on the hallway carpet. A loud slam on the door. Then the door burst open like it wasn't even locked. Armed officers rushed inside yelling commands. She froze and dropped her phone. I raised my hands out of pure instinct even though I had no idea what was going on. One officer pulled me away from the sofa while another grabbed her before she could even move. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just kept saying she didn't know it would go this far. The officers unplugged the baby monitor instantly. One of them said it was streaming to a site that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Apparently viewers had reported the stream because they recognized her from other videos she had done. She wasn't the victim. She was the one staging fetish live stream dates without telling the men she invited over. Some viewers said she'd been doing it for months. Some said she had a whole account based on secretly filming guys doing normal things. Sitting, talking, eating, just being there. I didn't even know what to say. I didn't even feel angry yet. It was too fast. She sat there on the floor while they cuffed her, staring at the plant like she expected it to save her or something. They let me go after checking my ID and asking a few questions. I walked out of that building feeling like I'd stepped out of some weird alternate reality. The hallway looked normal again, but I swear I could still hear the faint buzzing of the baby monitor even after they unplugged it. The worst part is knowing I would have never noticed it if she didn't go to the bathroom so many times. I would just sat there like a clown while a bunch of random strangers watched me in real time. I wasn't even planning to go out that night. I'd been scrolling dating apps out of boredom more than anything, not expecting anything serious, just something to break the routine. Then this girl matched with me and replied instantly every time. Her messages were short, like she didn't want to waste time. She asked if I wanted to grab a drink or even just walk around for a bit. Normally I'd say no because meeting someone that fast always feels rushed, but something about the way my day was going made me say yes. I thought it would be a quick meet-up, nothing deep. I met her outside this small cafe near the main road. She was already there when I arrived, standing by the corner like she was waiting for someone else too. I said hi and she jumped slightly, like I came up behind her even though she clearly saw me walking toward her. She kept her hood up even though it wasn't raining and kept her bag pulled tight across her chest. She wasn't rude or anything, just on edge, like she was expecting someone to run up on her at any time. We started walking and I noticed she kept turning her head every few seconds. Not just looking around casually, but staring at every car that passed like she was scanning the plates. At first I thought she just had social anxiety or didn't like crowds, but it wasn't that. She didn't look uncomfortable with me. She looked scared of something else. Every time a car slowed down near us, even if it was just someone parking, she flinched. She stepped closer to me in this weird way, not affectionate, but like she was trying to make herself smaller. She kept asking if I heard anything behind us, even though it was literally just regular street noise. Buses, rakes, people talking. Nothing strange. I joked lightly, asking if she always checked every car like that. She didn't laugh. She said people look for you when you least expect it. Her voice shook a bit when she said it, like it wasn't some random quote. It sounded like something she'd been repeating to herself for a long time. We walked for another 10 minutes, and I noticed she kept checking her phone but not texting. She opened the camera a few times and pointed it at the street, pretending to fix her hair. I could see her eyes in the screen, looking behind her every few seconds. She walked fast, too fast for it to be a casual pace, so I kept up without saying anything. She told me she lived close and asked if I could walk her home. Again, she said it like it didn't matter, but her voice cracked slightly. I wanted to ask what was going on, but she didn't seem like she'd tell me anything, and I didn't want to make her panic more. The whole atmosphere around her felt thick, like we were walking through something heavy that she wasn't explaining. As we got closer to the building she stayed in, she slowed down a lot. Every step she took, she looked in both directions. The building was an old block with cracked bricks and a door that looked like it had been kicked before. She walked ahead and stood by the entrance like she was checking for something inside. I didn't hear any noise, but she pressed her back against the wall for a moment like she was bracing herself. She finally said I could come up for a sec if I wanted. She said it quietly, almost like she regretted inviting me the moment it left her mouth. I didn't know if she wanted company or if she didn't want to go in alone. Either way, I followed because leaving her there felt wrong. We got inside, and the hallway smelled like damp carpet and something burnt. The lights flickered slightly. She kept glancing at the stairwell windows. Her hands were shaking when she opened the door to her flat. It looked messy, not gross but chaotic, like someone had been moving things around constantly. The curtains were pinned shut with clothes hangers. Boxes were stacked near the door like she had been packing or unpacking in a rush. She walked around checking the rooms quickly, almost like she was making sure nobody else was in there. Her breathing was loud, almost harsh. When she finished looking around, she sat down on the floor near the door instead of on the sofa. She hugged her knees like she was grounding herself. I didn't know what to do, so I stayed standing, waiting for her to say something. I tried to ask if she was okay, but her head shot up suddenly like she heard something outside. She pressed her hand against the floor like she was feeling vibrations. I didn't hear anything, but her face drained completely of color. She whispered that they found her and she didn't know how, and before I could even ask who she meant, everything went loud. Boots on the stairs, multiple footsteps, radios crackling, someone shouting for doors to be opened. Then the banging started. Not on her door yet, but on the one below us. She flinched so hard she almost fell sideways. I stepped back because I didn't know if I should run or stay or help her hide. She kept mumbling something about how this wasn't her fault and how she didn't mean to drag anyone into it. Before I could ask anything, her front door blasted open. Armed officers swarmed in so fast the air almost moved around them. They had shields up and everything. One grabbed me and pulled me back into the hallway while two pinned her down. She didn't fight back. She just kept crying that she didn't know I would be here. She said she didn't want to pull more people in. I sat against a hallway wall while the whole building shook with movement. Officers going up the stairs. Neighbors shouting. Doors slamming. Everything stacked on top of each other so fast that I barely processed any of it. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a few minutes, someone finally explained what had happened. She had been hiding from a gang for weeks after witnessing something she wasn't supposed to see. They'd been looking for her since. She thought if she matched with people on dating apps and walked around with them, the gang would hesitate to grab her in public because she wasn't alone. She had been using dates like shields without telling them. Someone in the building tipped off the police that she had been coming and going at weird hours. They had been tracking the gang members and figured out they were close. The raid wasn't even for her at first. It was to catch the gang moving in, but when they realized she was inside the flat, everything went into chaos. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was panicking, doing whatever she thought might keep her safe. They escorted me out and told me I could go home. I read everything online later and the story lined up. She wasn't making anything up. She was just trapped in something bigger than she could handle. The worst part is knowing she dragged random people into it without thinking. Knowing if the timing had been slightly different, I could walk straight into something I wouldn't walk out from. I didn't plan on going to anyone's flat that night. I was supposed to stay home, order something cheap, and just chill. But the guy I matched with messaged me the whole afternoon, and for some reason I didn't mind it. He seemed normal, not overly weird, not trying too hard. His pictures looked like he actually had friends and didn't spend every minute gaming in the dark. He said he lived not far from the station and that we could watch a movie and relax. I thought that sounded fine because I didn't want anything big, just something that would distract me. Getting to his place wasn't dodgy or anything. The area looked decent and the building was one of those slightly old blocks but still looked safe. When he opened the door, he looked the same as his pics, maybe a bit more tired, but nothing that made me think twice. The flat smelled like microwave popcorn and some kind of air freshener. He said he had to grab snacks from the shop downstairs because he forgot. He said he'd be 2 minutes and told me I could choose a movie. Again, nothing out of line. I'd been in worse situations with guys acting weird straight away. The flat was small and not dirty, but definitely messy in the lived-in way. Shoes everywhere, random receipts on the counter, half-folded clothes. I sat on the couch and scrolled through the movie list on his tab. The living room was warm, and there was this low humming sound from the fridge. I was actually comfortable for a minute. I kept thinking maybe this was one of those rare times where things would just be normal. Then I heard something. It sounded like paper moving or someone stepping on a plastic bag. Really soft, but enough to make me look up. It came from the bedroom. I didn't want to be that person who jumps at every noise, so I ignored it at first. But then it happened again. Longer this time, like someone trying not to make sound but still making it. I told myself maybe he had a pet. Maybe a cat was messing around. But I didn't see any bowls or toys anywhere. So I stood up and walked closer to the hallway. The sound stopped as soon as I did. I froze for a second because it felt like whatever it was could hear me moving. I went back to the sofa and tried to pretend I didn't care. But curiosity was chewing at me. And honestly, I didn't want to sit there wondering if something was creeping through his stuff. So I got up again and walked in the bedroom. The room was darker than the living room, but still had some light from the street coming through the blinds. Nothing looked out of place except the wardrobe door. It was closed but slightly uneven, like something inside was pushing against it. That's when I heard it again. A quick rustle. Then something like a soft thud. My stomach dropped. I thought maybe something fell inside it, or maybe he stuffed something in there quickly before I arrived. I reached out and touched the handle. My hand was actually shaking, and I tried to breathe slowly because I felt stupid being scared of a wardrobe. I opened it just a bit at first. I didn't see anything except coats. Then I opened it fully. There was a girl inside. She was tied at the wrists and ankles with this thick tape, and there was tape over her mouth. Her eyes were wide and wet, completely locked on mine like she was begging me without saying anything. Her hair was messy and sticking to her face like she'd been sweating or crying. She jerked slightly forward when she saw me, and the coat hangers rattled behind her. I almost dropped to the floor. I didn't even know what to do first. My brain just scrambled. I kept looking at the door, then back at her, then at the tape around her. I wanted to rip it off her mouth. My hands felt numb. I didn't know if he was coming back any second, or if she would scream and make things worse. I whispered that I'd help her, but my voice came out so shaky, I didn't even know if she understood. My fingers were clumsy trying to peel the tape, but it wouldn't budge. I kept looking behind me like someone was going to walk in at any second. I heard footsteps in the hallway outside the flat. Not close, but enough to snap me back. I slammed the wardrobe, not fully, but close enough to hide her if he walked in fast. I could still hear her breathing hard on the other side. Then I heard the front door unlocking. My whole head went blank. He walked in holding 2 shopping bags and laughing to himself like nothing was going on, like he had no idea what I had seen. He didn't look nervous. He didn't rush. He just kicked the door shut and dropped the bags on the kitchen counter. The rustling sound of the items inside made me want to throw up because the wardrobe noise was still replaying in my head. I didn't know if he knew I'd been in his room. He didn't look like he suspected anything. He glanced at me and started talking casually about the snacks he picked. I felt like I wasn't even in my own body anymore. I kept nodding like everything was fine. I didn't know how to tell him I'd found someone tied up in his wardrobe. And then everything exploded. Police burst through the front door so fast I thought the whole frame was going to break. He jumped back and shouted something, but they were already on him. They pinned him to the ground before he even got a chance to run. The shopping bags fell and stuff spilled everywhere. One of the officers pointed at the bedroom, and another 2 rushed in. I stood there frozen while they dragged the girl out wrapped in a blanket. One officer kept asking if I was hurt, but I couldn't even answer. I just stared at him on the floor, his face pressed against it, hands behind his back, complaining like he didn't just have someone hidden in his room. He didn't look scared. He looked annoyed, like they interrupted something he thought he could control. They later told me he'd been doing this to multiple girls he matched with. The police were already tracking him because one girl managed to call them before being grabbed. They'd been watching the building and waiting for a moment where he opened the door. It said walked in at the wrong time, but also the right time because I didn't get hurt. When I think about it now, the scariest part wasn't the wardrobe or seeing her tied up. It was how normal he acted when he returned. How calm he looked. How he didn't rush. How he didn't check anything. He walked in like he knew nobody would ever find out. I don't even know why I'm typing this out, but I can't get the whole thing out of my head. It didn't feel like a normal day from the start. The weather was that plain gray where everything looks washed out, and I remember thinking the whole town felt like it was running on half power. I wasn't even supposed to meet anyone that day, but the girl I matched with the night before kept messaging me. She seemed chilled, nothing weird, and she suggested grabbing something from this small cafe near the station. It was close to where I worked, so I thought cool, wherever I'll go. When I got there, she was already outside leaning against her car. I remember thinking she looked different from her pictures, but not in a bad way. Just like she had less effort on, more normal. I waved like an idiot and she waved back. I pointed at the cafe, but she said she didn't really feel like going inside because it was crowded. She said we could sit in her car for a bit so she could finish something on her phone. I didn't really feel excited about that, but I didn't want to make it awkward, and it didn't seem like a big deal, so I got in. The first thing that hit me was how warm the car was. Not in a cozy way, more like she had been sitting there with the heaters blasting for ages. Everything inside felt too quiet, like even the sounds outside were muted. She locked the doors, which I found weird, but I didn't say anything. She was smiling a lot, like trying too hard, and kept tapping her screen as if she needed a reason to look down. I was trying to figure out why I felt off when my foot shifted forward and hit something under the passenger seat. At first I thought it was just some charger or bag, but when I glanced down, I saw the front of a small camcorder sticking out. The lens was pointing straight up at my face. Not angled, not random, directly at me. I can't even explain the way my chest dropped. I just froze for a second staring at it like I wasn't sure if it was real. I tried to act normal and looked out the window because I didn't want her to notice that I noticed. But she was still smiling at her phone and pretending to scroll, even though I could see her screen wasn't moving. Her hands were shaking slightly. I kept telling myself I was overthinking. Maybe it wasn't even hers. Maybe she did videography or some hobby thing. But the camcorder was on. I could see the tiny red light on the side. I leaned back in the seat like I was stretching and slipped my hand down enough to touch it. It was warm. That's how I knew it'd been running for a while. She kept asking random questions about my job and what I liked doing, and all of it felt so forced. I could hear cars passing outside, and every time someone walked past the car, I felt like begging for them to look inside, just to have some normal human interaction in case something went wrong. The whole time, she kept glancing at the mirrors. Not at me, not at her phone, but the mirrors. Constantly, as if she was waiting for someone. Every few seconds, her leg would bounce. She was jittery, but not like someone nervous to meet a date. More like someone waiting for a signal. I kept trying to plan how to leave without making it weird. I didn't want to confront her. Confronting felt like the worst possible move. I thought about pretending I got a message, maybe saying my friend needed help or something. But I was scared she'd do something if she felt like I was onto her. The locked doors didn't help either. I didn't know if she had child locks on the back ones or something, even though I was in the front. I leaned forward like I was tying my shoe so I could look under the seat better. Next to the camcorder, there was a small battery pack with wires taped together. The tape was black, thick, and wrapped around way too many times for it to be normal. Not like something someone uses for filming. It looked like something someone uses when they need to set things up fast. That's when I realized she wasn't even looking at the mirrors anymore. She was looking past me, through the window on my side. I slowly turned my head, and that's when I saw them. Police cars. Quiet. Rolling in. No sirens. Just moving in from two different sides of the street like they were surrounding the area. I didn't know if they were for us or someone else. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. She wasn't moving either. She just stared forward like she knew exactly why they were there. The moment the first officer stepped out, she whispered under her breath, but not towards me. Almost like she was talking to someone else not in the car. Then everything happened at once. Lights flashed. Someone shouted. The doors were pulled open before she could even react. Officers grabbed her first, pulled her straight out onto the pavement. I didn't even get to stand up before 3 of them were around me telling me not to move. I remember the way one officer looked at the camcorder. He didn't even look surprised. Just annoyed, like he'd already seen too many of them that day. Later they told me they had been tracking a group that used dates from apps to film people in cars without them knowing. They'd used the footage for blackmail. Apparently the people running it had been switching cars all week, and they had finally traced this one. The girl wasn't even the main person behind it. She was more like someone who helped set up the recording. I wasn't even scared during the moment. It was afterwards, when I sat on the curb while they talked to her and she kept looking at me with this weird blank expression. Not angry. Not upset. Almost bored that the whole thing didn't matter. That's what got to be the most. I keep thinking if I hadn't bumped that camcorder, or if the police had been 10 minutes later, I wouldn't even know I'd been recorded. I would have probably laughed it off, thought it was a chill date, and gone home with no idea. That's the part that keeps messing with my head.